What's up, guys? Welcome back to the shop. In today's video we're going to be trying something I've tried multiple times throughout my career as a knife maker, I guess you would call it, and that is to make a stainless sanmai. Now, I have tried this multiple times before and I've never had a really good success. I have made very small knives that are not really all that great, and that is because a solid 60-70% of the billet did not properly weld. So we're going to try again this time. But the only real difference is with this new forge, I can hit heat a lot higher and a lot more consistent than I did with my old Venturi style burner, which really only heated in select parts, versus this one that heats the whole billet nice and evenly. And another thing that is very important for making these types of welds work out is welding the billet all the way around. Stainless steel is very delicate to weld, especially if there's any oxygen. So you got to make sure to have a nice oxygen free weld. And you have to get it very hot, much hotter than your standard Damascus. Overall, the billet did weld pretty nicely, though I did get a little scared towards the end because it was really hard to keep it hot and stretch it out thin enough to make a usable knife. Of course, it's easy to get down to about a quarter thickness on the hydraulic press, but once you try to get thinner than that, you're really pushing it and it's quickly sucking the heat out of the billet. Also, another thing that I'm not really sure, but I've seen around, that you should not forge it, but I've also seen people successfully forge it, so I'm not sure what the trick behind that is. So I did try to thin it out a little bit and make the billet more narrow and longer. That way I could have a little bit more to play with, but I tried to keep it as non-aggressive as I could. But in all truthfulness, I got a little skeptical as I was working it, so I opted out to not really do too much more. I would much rather have a smaller knife than having my fourth failure. Alright guys, so we have our billet here. This is actually the farthest I've ever gone on a stainless sanmai. It actually stuck. Most of the time I get some weird cracking and then I don't know where it's crap. So I'm pretty excited about this one. One thing though, we can't really be sure until I grind all the edges and make sure everything is fully welded. So that's probably the first thing we're gonna do. We're gonna make sure all the edges are ground all the way around and we have nice clean steel. And then we'll probably take it from there. I had planned on making the billet a little bit longer, but that's as far as we got. I wanted to thin it down a little bit, but I was kind of a little scared. A lot of videos I've seen where other people do it, it kind of, they really don't recommend forging it. So I just kind of want something to work out for once with stainless sanmai. So I'm just going to run it like this. But next time I try it, I will try to forge it down a little bit. Maybe I can get it to do it without splitting, but I'm not sure. So I'm going to go on ahead and take it to 2x72, and we're just going to grind all these edges around and make sure that we are good to go. Alright guys, so I ground out all the edges and I even put in some ferric chloride real quick. And as you can see, we have pretty good coverage all the way around. There are some spots that are relatively thin on the stainless steel. But other than that, it's looking pretty good, pretty even. So we're going to go on ahead and grind off all the face, and then we're going to go ahead and figure out what we're gonna do for our knife shape. So for the shape of the knife, I kind of went more of a full tang deba. Now that I think about it, I should definitely go with more of a hidden tang, and in the future I will be going hidden tang on these particular knives, and I will pretty much explain that a little bit further in the video once we get to that part. But I will definitely be going hidden tang more often than I normally tend to. And that is a sentiment I've been going over in multiple videos now ever since I started doing more hidden tangs, and I just find them a lot easier and a lot more practical for custom knives. If I was doing, let's say, a production style knife, it is better to go with a full tang just because it's a lot easier and a lot quicker to do the handles, especially if you're having them like laser cut. You're doing a lot less drilling, or if you're drilling but the material has already been softened, it's already annealed and you've never gone through any kind of heating and cooling process, then drill bits go through it pretty easily. But knives tend to work harden as you work them, and then they need multiple different temperings and it ends up becoming a hassle. So here, after I profile the knife, I end up having to heat it up and fix a little bit of a warp I had. There was no point in trying to get the warp out through grinding, as it would just waste material. So I opted out for just heating it up and straightening it out. Here is where I run into the issue where I said I don't really like to do full tangs anymore, and that is that stainless steel air hardens. And I went through a lot of bits. I cut a lot of it out just for the sake of not making this video extremely long, but I went through a lot of drill bits, so much that I ended up quitting and I just surface grounded instead. And after I surface grounded, I pretty much called it a day because it was relatively late into the afternoon and I couldn't really step forward to the heat treating process without doing my holes for my pins. The next day I went and bought some carbide bits and it went right through like butter. So it's important to have some carbide bits on hand, especially if you're working with stainless or doing stainless samurai in this case. Alright guys, so I got the holes drilled. I ended up having to buy some carbide bits so I could drill those holes. This stuff hardened pretty good, even though I pretty much tempered it to try to take off the hardness after I initially couldn't drill through it. I still ended up having to get carbide bits and it's not even hardened. So we're going to move on to doing the handle, because if I just go on ahead and harden it right now, it's going to be out of my hands for about 4 hours, a little bit more than 4 hours. So in the meantime, I can be working on my handle. So I'm going to go on ahead and get the handle, start prepping it, and then we'll go on ahead and heat treat this guy. So these are the handle scales I'm going to be using. They are composites. I got these courtesy of my buddy Mike, and we're going to be using them with this. I think it's going to pair well with the light colors that in the contrast I get in the actual steel once everything is heat treated and the coffee etched. So I think they're going to mesh well together. So we're going to go on ahead and get started. So I opted out for using this handle material versus any other one I had because I thought that these lighter colors would pair well with the stainless cladding I'm going to have on the outside of the knife. And since that stainless cladding is literally just stainless steel, it doesn't have a lot of movement in it or any kind of that, so the knife isn't very busy. So I thought a more standout handle would be able to match it very well. This is the first time I do these kinds of handles, or it's one of the first couple times, so it was a bit of a hassle to line everything up. It's an extra little step, but it's definitely worth it. You do not want your scales to end up misaligned and then looking all weird and stuff. And on a very quick note, I am not using black pins for this guy. I know I have black pins on there while I'm prepping it, but that's because that's what I had at the moment. I ordered white pins, and when they got there I ended up using those for the knife. It would not look good with black pins, and I didn't really want to go with stainless either. And the particular reason why they want to go with stainless is simply because any kind of harder material, it wears a lot slower than the handle material, especially this handle material is very soft. So if I went with any kind of metal versus a G10 per se, it will grind at different rates and you're going to have a little bit of a bump, especially after hand sanding. Alright guys, so we are out of the temper. The knife is looking good. Our core is pretty centered pretty well. And overall, I think it's looking pretty good. We're going to go on ahead and get our finish grind going. And I think I'm going to do an S grind on this guy. just to help out with its cutability and to reduce some of the weight on this guy. Overall, I'm very happy with it. It's looking pretty good. So here I'm using my 6-inch wheel just to clean it up, and I'm going through different grits. Here I'm going at 120 and I'm just cleaning up the surface before I go and start doing my bevels. For the bevels, it's very easy to check your progress because as you're grinding these knives, you can see how the different layers start popping up, especially with the difference in the stainless and the non-stainless steel. Especially once you start working it and you get it in the water enough, it'll form a tiny layer of oxide, and you'll be able to see what layer has oxide and what doesn't. If not, you can just shine it up against the light and you can see the different steels in there. Like you can see right here, all those peaks and valleys are where the two different steels are starting to separate, and the boundary is clearly exposed. Hand sanding this knife wasn't very difficult. It hand sanded very nicely, especially with the grit progression that I went through. But one thing to keep in mind whenever you are hand sanding knives like these that have just one color going throughout it, you have to pay more attention to your sanding versus, like, let's say a high layer Damascus where all the movement hides some of the grind lines. You don't get that luxury whenever you have just two different steels versus multiple layers. So here you can see those white pins that I talked about. They got here on time and I was able to use them with this knife. I also used a different tint of epoxy. I just threw a little bit of blue in there just to help in case I had any kind of gaps or anything like that. And now, as you can see, we're grinding off the pins and they grind evenly and very easily. And you can see the material is very soft and it's very dusty. And as I had said before, if I used any kind of metal pins like stainless steel to match the blade, it really wouldn't come out right because that stainless grinds off at a different rate because it is a much harder material. Even though it is annealed, it's still a lot harder overall. And for the handle shape, as you know, I like to do very simple handles. So I just grind off all the excess material and then I do a bit of a, I'm not sure what you would call it. I just grind the front and then I make it match the back pretty much in a straight line. I'm not really sure if there's a specific name for that, but I like to give it a taper to the handle just because it sits comfortable, and you always want to be able to have a little bit less material up front when you're doing a pinch grip. And because all these materials are synthetic materials, I can get away with it just putting it in the edge and then putting it into the coffee, and it does not change the color of the handle material, but it does do a great edge overall. Unfortunately, I forgot to do my cut test before I did my edge, so we're just going to have a simple paper cut test this time. Overall, it was a great knife. If you would like to own this knife, it is available online. If you liked the video, be sure to like the video. And overall, I'm very happy. I actually had a successful stainless steel sand knife for the first time ever. And I'm very happy with the way the handle came out because I feel like it matches it very well. Overall, thank you guys very much for watching. I greatly appreciate y'all, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.